love a woman from God to Adam. How can you, Adam, abstain from a creature so magnificent, crafted from your bones, infused with my kindness, compassion, patience, wisdom, and beauty, as it is within me and of me? She was crafted by me to be your sole companion, fight by your side, and fiercely protect you with courage, championship, and charisma, so as to when a creature like her avails herself to open herself and give of herself freely to you, complete, so that you may protect her, serve her, honor her, cherish her, and love her until your very last breath, never impaling hurt or sadness or disappointment on her heart, as it would be to impale Christ himself with the sword of destiny, while his tears wash upon your face as you behold your deed. You would prefer 1,000 deaths and forego divinity should you ever falter in your quest to give her the best of you, Adam. I crafted her out of love for you, Adam, and thus she was made only from your rib to hold the frame, but everything else I infused in her from me, so that you may not be alone and know companionship through her. Does it not suffice to say that I love you so much that I would create a companion so great that it would satisfy all of your desires and leave you not wanting, but fulfilled? Love that is so impossibly pure and great that she suffers the holding on to of it. Therefore, she fiercely protects it and will not give it willingly, neither under duress. For her to love is to bare her soul, to walk naked amongst wolves and lions, covered in blood, not fearing an attack. How could you bear seeing the pain and disappointment in her eyes, knowing that I, your Creator, shine behind them, seeing you not for what you've become, but who you truly are? Her eyes pierces through masks and lies, and she can only recognize truth and essence. Her eyes are your compass, leading you to the straight and the narrow. They are alarms, warning you of enemies in your midst. They are your maps when you travel, carefully observing every detail so that in time of being lost, they can guide you back home. They are your flags for when desire dims and thus reminds you to awaken the embers, to ignite the flames once again, so that you may prolong your stay in her embrace. They are your looking glass into the future. When uncertainty is about, they will point you to the right decision by the sparkle that ignites when the choices are laid before her. They are a reminder of my glory every time she gazes upon an innocent or a child. This is when she glows with my glory and reminds you that I, God, love you exactly like that, my son. I have the same enduring, overpowering sense of utmost joy when I gaze upon your innocence. It is this that fuels my grace and forgiveness. It is with this that this creature bestows her love even on the most undeserving of men, as she has no understanding of beholding it from others. Such a willing offer, knowing full well you are incapable of such a force and fierceness, but understanding that without it you should wilt to the ground. and be frozen as a rock, touched by the dew, becoming brittle. Thus, Adam, is thee willing to truly love? Is thee willing to accept the responsibility and consequence of being bestowed upon? Does thee understand the chaos and the absolute hellfire and despair that ensues should that love be failed? Does any man think himself brave enough to awaken it from its hiding place? The scorn of love is so that she hides it, as to not unwillingly bestow it upon one that does not request bestowing upon. She mistakes herself as brave, but she's not. She's fragile in the knowing that she herself cannot choose, but has to be chosen. For it to be true love, scorn becomes death when it is unrequited. She's not been created to belong, to reside beside, but to care for, to help, to give, to heal, to support, to embrace, to guide, and to comfort. This is her purpose. She was not made to suffer winter. She was not made to conquer or to till, or to defend or to safeguard or to cherish. She was made to give you a reason and a purpose to live. If not for love, then for what? Men, be warned. You do not know the depth of my love, or its fierceness and its wrath. Do not enter into this union lightly. But blessed is he that hath the fortitude, the strength and the bravery and the fierceness to be embraced by its loving arms, caressed by its sweet lips, touched by its kindness, and bathed in its ecstasy. Cherish it, protect it, defend it, guide it, honor it, and it will make you a king amongst men, soaring to the heavens and erase all that does not do the same. Tread lightly, move boldly, and dance swaying. And should you fall before your winter, fear not. If you have heeded my command, she will have the fortitude to keep you within her walls until I come for you both. Should you, however, not heed my command, then know you shall bear the full wrath of my scorn, and you shall be on trial for murder. She will love you to the end of your days, even if you neglect her, or abuse her, or dishonor her. The love I entrusted in her is so great that it even overcomes rejection and disillusion. Her revenge will be that of your legacy. Your children will know and come to learn of all your shortcomings. Your parents will be guilted, and they will suffer your ignorance and indignation. Your property will dissolve and be replaced by another, and she shall emerge the victor, the righteous, the dignified, and the bearer of all things. She shall conquer the hearts of your family, your friends, your children, and your colleagues. Your name will only be spoken as a whisper, with indignation, and you shall stand alone before my throne, and there exists no deed great enough for me to absolve you of your sin against this creature that I forged out of love, with love, and bestowed upon you, my son, the one that I loved first, the one I sent to die with love, to grip you from the clutches of eternal death, embodied within the form of Eve, crafted from your bones, and thus to bone you shall return, while she will continue to ebb and flow within my veins. This, Adam, was my gift to you when you suffered the embrace of loneliness. You were created in my image. She was created with my love, my endless love for you, Adam, my firstborn, my precious being. How I treasure you so.
What if the oldest story in human history, I mean the creation of Adam and Eve, what if it isn't just, a metaphor or some myth or a murky moral fable? What if it is a highly specific, mechanically precise, cosmic love letter?
Oh.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Ah.
If you are joining us today, prepare to completely dismantle the way you've traditionally viewed the Garden of Eden. Because today, we're asking a massive question based on an expansive, really poetic and incredibly detailed theological document that we have right here in front of us.
Right. It's a huge text.
It really is. The text is titled Who Dares to Love? And it's penned by Catherine Hall, and it arrives with a rather bold claim, honestly.
Oh.
The author describes the document as arriving through direct divine inspiration.
Yeah, and it constructs just a staggering universe for you, the listener, to navigate today. But before we explore the mechanics of this universe, and there are a lot of mechanics, I want to establish a very clear framework for you as you listen.
That's super important, yeah.
Right, because this text contains deeply traditional, occasionally controversial, and really hyper-specific socio-religious viewpoints on, well, gender dynamics, modern relationships, biology, and theology.
Mm.
And our goal today is absolutely not to endorse these viewpoints. We are not here to debate their objective truth, nor are we taking any sides politically or socially.
Right. Definitely not taking sides here.
Exactly. Our job is to act as your impartial guides, unpacking exactly what this fascinating source argues, how it constructs its incredibly specific reality, and the internal logic that it relies on. We are simply exploring the architecture of the ideas contained in the original source material.
Right, because the architecture of those ideas is fundamentally built on the divine purpose behind the creation of Eve and Adam.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to unpack the unique, almost scientifically described responsibilities given to each partner.
Yeah, the science of it is wild.
It is, and we're going to dive deep into this source's portrayal of the overwhelming, almost terrifying beauty of the Creator's love for Adam, which is basically the engine driving this entire narrative.
It really is.
But to understand how we get to Eve, we really have to understand the void before her, right? So take us back to the state of the universe right before Eve existed. What is the baseline reality for Adam here?
Okay, so the baseline is a very specific, almost utilitarian type of perfection. According to the text, God created Adam first, and he created him solely for one function, just one.
And that is fellowship.
Fellowship, okay.
Right, but to grasp the weight of that word in this specific universe,
Yeah.
the author draws a really sharp distinction between Adam and literally everything else in the known cosmos up to that exact moment.
Like the angels, right.
Exactly, the angels.
Yeah.
Before Adam, God had created the angelic host. He had created the entire physical universe, planets, gravity, elements, protons, neutrons. But the text argues that angels worship God because they have to.
Wait, like they don't have a choice.
No choice at all. It is their fundamental programming. They cannot choose otherwise. It's like how planets spin in their orbits because they physically need to, right?
Yeah.
This is their physical nature.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so if you imagine being the creator, surrounded by billions of entities that sing your praises eternally, I mean, it sounds majestic on paper.
Right, on paper.
But this text argues it's essentially sterile. Like if you build a machine and program it to say, you are great, it doesn't really mean anything when the machine actually says it.
No, it doesn't.
It's just an echo of your own coding.
That is precisely the argument the source makes. Adam was entirely different from the angels. Because Adam was handed what the text calls the ultimate dangerous gift, which is choice.
Choice, with a capital C.
Exactly. God wanted a being who loved him out of choice, not obligation. He wanted a being that could look at the Creator, recognize him, and actively decide to engage.
Which, if you think about it, introduces an incredible amount of risk into a previously totally risk-free universe.
Oh, a massive amount of risk.
Because the moment you give a creation choice, you introduce the possibility that they might, choose something else.
Right. But God takes that risk because the payoff, which is genuine fellowship, is worth it to him. And the way the text describes Adam's original design is fascinating, honestly, because it defies our normal expectations of a quote-unquote perfect human.
Right. You think perfect human, you think like a saint.
Exactly. But God gave Adam intellect, strength, logic, and perseverance.
Oh.
He needed intellect to converse on a high level with God, strength to physically manage and study the garden, logic to build a baseline of interaction.
Okay.
But God explicitly did not give Adam compassion. He did not give him kindness, and he did not give him patience.
Wait, really? No compassion. That completely upends the traditional view of Eden.
Right.
You hear perfect human, and you automatically assume they possess like a full suite of virtues.
Yeah, all the nice traits.
But if we evaluate this through the text's internal logic, it actually makes perfect mechanical sense. Why didn't Adam possess compassion? Well, because the Garden of Eden was a flawless ecosystem. There was absolutely no suffering.
None at all.
And compassion is a tool used to alleviate suffering.
Right. Exactly.
So giving Adam compassion in a world without pain would be like, I don't know, giving someone scuba gear in the middle of a desert.
Yeah, it's just completely unnecessary weight, useless.
Yeah.
Because nothing was broken, so patience wasn't required. Everything happened in its optimal time.
Right.
There was nothing to be kind to because no creature was in distress or lacking anything. Adam was perfectly surgically equipped for the exact environment he inhabited.
That's wild. It paints a picture of Adam as this incredibly sharp, pragmatic, highly capable entity. And it kind of reframes that word fellowship, doesn't it? If Adam doesn't have soft virtues like, unbridled compassion. His interactions with God aren't just sitting around singing hymns and being gentle.
No, not at all. The text provocatively implies that fellowship means Adam could give honest feedback. He could debate God. He could question the mechanics of a flower or, like, the orbit of the moon. The text even hints that Adam could tell the Creator when he was, at least from a human perspective, talking nonsense.
Oh, wow. So he's calling God out.
Basically, yeah. The author explicitly compares it to the dynamic men all over the world have with each other. They are buds. It's true peer-to-peer interaction.
I just kept visualizing God before Adam as like a CEO of a massive multinational corporation.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. And for eternity, the CEO has been surrounded entirely by yes men, which they're angels. Whatever the CEO says, the angels just reply, flawless strategy, boss. Brilliant.
Great job, sir.
Yeah. God didn't want another yes man. He wanted a peer. He wanted a buddy to like sit by the campfire with and debate the universe. And Adam was that guy. And God loved him for it.
He really did.
And here's the big question. If this dynamic was so incredibly perfect, if Adam was precisely engineered for this environment and this relationship, why introduce a second variable? Why disrupt a flawless system?
Well, the introduction of the second variable happens because of the one singular thing God, despite his infinite power, could not provide for Adam. Quality of form. This realization is the catalyst for everything that follows. See, God and Adam had deep, unmatched fellowship, but Adam observed his environment. He used that logic and intellect God gave him to study the animals.
Right. He's looking around.
Exactly. He saw that they were paired up, they existed as twos, and Adam basically comes to God and presents a logical problem. He says, I love you, but you are not like me. I am a one, and I want to be a two.
Man, put yourself in Adam's shoes for a second. You are walking around this absolute paradise. You see the lions together. You see the birds together. They share a physical plane of existence. They experience the temperature the same way. They experience hunger the same way. And Adam is just walking around with the literal creator of the universe.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic intellectual relationship, sure, but God doesn't have skin. God doesn't get tired. It's not a peer in the physical sense. Adam realizes he is the only entity in existence that is entirely alone in his category.
And this is where the text heavily emphasizes the absolute overpowering nature of God's love for Adam. Because God agrees to solve the problem.
He actually listens to him.
He does. The source states explicitly, and this is a quote, the garden didn't need an Eve.
Wow.
God had no utilitarian need for another companion. The ecosystem didn't require her. God only initiated her creation because Adam asked. God willingly allowed his own creation to divide his attention.
That is a staggering concept.
Yeah.
God's primary purpose for Adam was fellowship with him. By creating Eve, God is willfully accepting a demotion in Adam's schedule.
Yeah, he really is.
He is giving up his best friend's time just to make his best friend happy. It frames the creator's love not as like a demanding dictatorial force, but as an incredibly selfless, accommodating devotion.
It's a really beautiful way of looking at it.
But the actual mechanics of how God constructs Eve, this is where the text gets wildly intricate, I think, because God can't just make a clone of Adam.
Right. If he makes an exact duplicate, Adam is basically just hanging out with himself. That doesn't solve the desire for a true counterpart, so God uses Adam's rib.
Right, the classic rib story.
But the text equates the rib to Adam's DNA. It serves as the physical frame. God uses the rib so that Eve will be undeniably of his species. She will be physically like Adam, fulfilling that desire for equality of form. But the frame is just the foundation. To fill that frame, God utilizes what the author calls the law of opposites.
So, like magnets, if you think about magnets, two positive ends repel each other. You need a positive and a negative to create a bond.
Exactly.
If Adam is entirely practical, stoic, and fiercely logical, Eve has to be the exact opposite for them to actually join together and function as a plural unit of two.
But the critical question the text answers is, where does God source these opposite ingredients from?
Wait, where did they come from?
He doesn't pull them from the stars or the soil or the animal kingdom. He extracts them from himself.
Wow.
God infuses Eve with his own divine spirit. He fills that DNA frame with his kindness, his boundless compassion, his unbridled patience, his wisdom, and his infinite capacity for love.
This distinction is paramount in the document. The source goes out of its way to separate the concept of a human from a creature with a capital C.
Right, capital T, creature.
It argues that we have billions of humans today. But Eve, in her original form, is defined as this magnificent singular creature because she is literally housing the emotional attributes of the Creator. She is a biological vessel walking around with divine technology implanted inside her.
And the internal logic dictates exactly why God chose those specific traits for Eve.
Why those ones?
Well, God knew that Adam already deeply loved him, right?
Yeah.
Adam loved God's kindness, his generosity, his patience in their debates. So when God had to design a companion that he could guarantee Adam would instantly accept and cherish, he simply took the parts of himself that Adam already adored and placed them inside Eve.
That is so smart.
It was a flawless mechanism to ensure Adam wouldn't reject her.
God knows his audience perfectly. He says, I know what Adam responds to. He loves these qualities in me, so I'm going to package them in a physical form that matches his. And the text leans heavily into poetic, almost structural descriptions of how these divine traits manifest in Eve's physical being. Like it argues her eyes are designed to be Adam's compass.
Oh, I love that part.
When Adam gets lost in his own logic or refuses to ask for directions, which the text playfully implies is a core trait of men, Eve's eyes are meant to lead him back to the straight and narrow.
They serve as navigational tools for his spiritual and physical journey. The author claims her eyes are maps to help him retrace his steps, but also they're alarms.
Alarms.
Yeah, they are red flags engineered to warn him of incoming threats or to signal him when her own desire or energy is dimming, basically cueing him that he needs to stoke the embers of their relationship.
And it even points to modern biological instincts as evidence of this original divine blueprint.
It does.
It argues that the instinct many women have to coo at babies,
Yeah,
to completely melt over anything small, innocent, and fragile, is not an evolutionary mechanism for species survival, like science says. The text claims it is a direct, deliberate insertion by God.
right. The author posits that God implanted that specific reaction in Eve to serve as a constant, living reminder to Adam.
A reminder of what?
When Adam sees Eve looking at a child with that overwhelming, pure joy, he is supposed to recognize that it is the exact same joy God feels when he looks at Adam's innocence.
Oh, wow.
It is a biological mirror reflecting divine love.
And it goes even deeper than that. That same implanted mechanism that makes a mother dissolve when a child simply says, I'm sorry. The text argues that is the exact mechanism that allows Eve to look at Adam no matter how badly he messes up and forgive him with infinite grace. Because that grace doesn't belong to her. It is literally God's endless grace operating independently inside her chest.
Which sets up an impossibly beautiful but highly delicate ecosystem.
Yeah, very delicate.
You have Adam, the strong, logical peer of the Creator. You have Eve, this breathtaking creature carrying God's emotional DNA. And you have God stepping back into the role of an observer, visiting them, reveling in their unity. It is a flawless triad.
So the obvious question, if you were listening to this right now, is,
Right.
If the engineering is this perfect, how does it fail?
Right.
How does this perfect triad collapse?
Right.
And the text's answer is chilling, frankly. It collapses because they're performing this beautiful love story in front of an audience. And one member of that audience absolutely despises what he is watching.
Yeah, the text frames the fall not merely as a tale of human weakness or temptation like we usually hear, but as a sweeping cosmic tragedy fueled by ancient jealousy and the weaponization of pure innocence.
Weaponized innocence. That's a strong phrase.
It really is. And to understand the fall in this universe, we must examine Satan's origin. Before Adam ever drew breath, Satan was God's favorite creation.
Really?
Yes. He was the most beautiful of the angelic host, and crucially, the text states he was in charge of sound and the elements of creation.
Let's hover on that detail for a second because it is wild. Satan being in charge of sound. If you look at physics, sound is just vibration. Vibrations can shatter glass, they can organize sand into geometric patterns, they can literally move matter.
Yeah.
The text implies Satan was using frequencies and sound as the tools to help construct the physical universe.
Exactly.
He was creating matter, creating atmospheres. He was the chief engineer.
A vital role, no doubt. But we must recall the foundational rule about angels in this text.
Yeah.
They do not possess the gift of choice.
Right. No choice.
Satan worked continuously. He worshipped God, labored without end, and reveled in his position at the top of the hierarchy. He was the most important entity in existence next to the Creator.
And then Adam is formed from the dust.
Right.
Imagine the whiplash. You are the chief engineer, the favored servant.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the boss brings in a new guy made of literal dirt.
Dirt.
And the boss gives this dirt man the one thing you, the magnificent angel of sound, have never been allowed to have. Choice.
Yeah, it's got a sting.
Satan watches God spend all his leisure time with Adam. The dynamic shifts. Satan goes from being the favored son to basically the ignored servant.
And the situation escalates dramatically with the creation of Eve. Satan watches God extract his own holy ingredients, his divine spirit, his compassion, his patience, and place them inside this new creature. These are ingredients no angel has ever possessed or even fully comprehended since the dawn of time.
The text makes a stark point here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That Satan has no fundamental knowledge of this concept called love.
He doesn't get it at all.
He can only observe its effects. He sees that God doesn't love the angels. He manages them. They are part of the operating system. But God deeply, irrationally loves Adam. And then God issues a devastating command. He orders the angels to obey Adam.
That command is the breaking point. The architecture of Satan's jealousy reaches its peak. He decides, if I cannot be the center of God's attention, no one will be.
Right. If I can't have him, nobody can.
Exactly. He resolves to dismantle this triad. But the tactical mechanics of how he executes this sabotage are what truly distinguish this text's interpretation.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
The serpent targets Eve. He entirely ignores Adam. And he preys on a hyper-specific, engineered vulnerability.
Yeah, the serpent approaches Eve and tells her she is lacking. He tells her she is incomplete, not quite perfect. Now, if you look at this through the traditional cultural lens, this is often framed as the woman being weak-willed or vain.
Right, that's the usual story.
But this text strips all of that away. We were debating this earlier, actually.
Yeah.
Why didn't the serpent just go to Adam?
The internal logic of the text provides a rigorous defense of this. We have to remember Adam's primary design: logic, intellect, and immense fellowship with God.
Right.
He spent a massive amount of time conversing with the Creator. He knew God's temperament, his rules, his voice. If the serpent had approached Adam and said, eat this fruit, you won't die, you'll become like God, Adam's logical framework would have activated.
It would have analyzed it.
Exactly. He would have analyzed the proposition and likely said, that contradicts my prior data. Let me go ask God about this.
Adam would have just fact-checked him.
Yes.
He would have said, hold that thought, snake. The boss is coming down on Tuesday. I'll put it on the agenda.
Pretty much.
The serpent knows Adam's relationship with God is too direct, too tested. Adam is immune to that specific lie.
Precisely. But Eve's dynamic was different. Her time was primarily spent with Adam, focusing on him. Furthermore, because she was infused exclusively with divine innocence and positive emotional attributes, she possessed absolutely no cognitive framework for lies, manipulation, or ill intent.
Wow.
In her mind, she inhabits a perfect garden created by a perfect God. Therefore, anything within that garden, including a talking serpent, must inherently be perfect and trustworthy. She simply couldn't conceive of a threat because she didn't have the internal machinery to process the concept of deception.
It's an incredible reframing. It's not a story of human failure. It is a story of a cosmic ancient entity exploiting a literal blind spot created by divine innocence. Eve only eats the fruit because the snake convinces her it will elevate her. And what is her core engineered drive?
Yeah.
To be the absolute best possible companion for Adam.
Right.
She genuinely believes she is acquiring an upgrade that will make her a better partner.
She attempts to fix a lack she didn't know she had, entirely in service of her divine purpose. The tragedy is profound. She consumes it, she hands it to Adam, and only after he consumes it and the entire fabric of their reality shatters does she casually mention the source of the fruit. She had no mechanism to understand the peril.
But wait, I have to challenge the text's logic here.
Okay, go for it.
The source makes a very bold assertion later on. It claims that God engineered this entire scenario. The tree, the fruit, the serpent's access to the garden. The text claims God set all of it up as a deliberate test. So if God engineered the trap and God knew Eve lacked the cognitive machinery to detect the lie, isn't God ultimately responsible for the collapse of his own perfect triad?
That's a great question, and the text does not shy away from that tension. In fact, it leans into the mechanics of cosmic law to explain it.
How so?
The author argues that God was obligated to test them because, in the architecture of this universe, virtues like loyalty, trust, and obedience only possess actual value if they are tested against an alternative.
Right.
If you lock someone in a room with only one door, their choice to use that door isn't a choice, it's inevitability.
Yeah, it's easy to be obedient when disobedience isn't an option on the menu.
Exactly the premise. God placed them in an environment that demanded they exercise their trust in him over their own limited understanding. If they had succeeded, their loyalty would be solidified beyond reproach for eternity.
But they failed.
They failed the test, and the immediate fallout of that failure leads us directly into what the text constructs as the most unique, high-stakes courtroom scene in theological history.
Okay, let's set the scene for the courtroom of Eden. Because this part reads less like a religious text and more like a suspenseful legal thriller.
It really does.
So the fruit is eaten. The perfection shatters. Adam and Eve realize they are naked, and their immediate instinct is to hide from God. But the text specifies a mechanical reason for why they hide.
Right, it's not just shame.
It's not merely psychological shame or modesty. Their actual biological composition has fundamentally mutated.
The source describes a terrifying transformation. They change from beings formed of animated dust and divine breath into flesh and blood entities. They now have odd bits, as the text somewhat humorously phrases it, and crucially, they now have blood pumping through veins.
They are mortal.
They're mortal. And accompanying this physical mutation is a new, devastating spiritual frequency.
Yeah.
Fear. They now fear the Creator. And the text notes a universal truth. You cannot maintain peer-to-peer fellowship with an entity you are terrified of.
The dynamic is dead. The buds are no longer buds. The relationship downgrades from fellowship to terrified duty.
Yeah.
So God enters the garden, seeking them out. He confronts them. And here is where the legal mechanics of this universe kick into high gear.
This is where it gets crazy.
God interrogates Adam, asking what happened. Adam does not invoke a right to silence. He admits he ate the fruit, but he immediately introduces Eve as both a witness and a co-conspirator. He says, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it."
He essentially throws the divine vessel under the bus.
Completely under the bus.
God then turns his interrogation to Eve. Eve also confesses, but she introduces the third party into evidence. She points to the serpent and says, "The serpent deceived me and I ate."
And this is the moment where the serpent executes what has to be the most brilliant, infuriating legal maneuver in cosmic history.
Oh, it's devious.
Confronted by the Creator, implicated by the defendants, the serpent exercises his right to remain silent.
He essentially pleads the Fifth Amendment of cosmic law.
Fifth.
The text argues that under the rigid laws of God's creation, a crime must be definitively proven and confessed, or the accused must be caught in the direct violation of a specific command. Because the serpent offered no confession, he technically remains innocent until proven guilty.
It's a massive, universe-altering technicality. If you look closely at the original commands, God never explicitly ordered the serpent not to eat from the tree.
Right, he didn't.
God gave that specific prohibition to Adam. The serpent merely presented an option to Eve. He tested their obedience. And since he was an angel and his job was to interact with the elements of creation, you could argue he was just performing a stress test on the system.
You really could.
He didn't break a direct verbal command from God, and he kept his mouth shut during the trial. So what is the consequence of God being outsmarted by his own legal framework?
The consequence is catastrophic. God is defined by his status as a perfect, just ruler. To maintain the structural integrity of his rule and the balance of existence, God cannot simply ignore a crime or associate with sin.
Right, or his whole system falls apart.
If he overlooks Adam's disobedience, his authority implodes. He is legally bound to punish the offense. Because Adam and Eve confessed to failing the test, they immediately forfeit their right to be the rulers of their inheritance, which is the earth. God has no choice but to banish them. But because the serpent did not technically break a direct command and refused to incriminate himself, God is forced by his own laws of balance to hand the operational keys of the earth over to him.
God has to hand the deed to the earth over to the exact being that intentionally sabotaged his favorite creation.
Yes.
It was a brutal legal defeat. But the scales of cosmic justice aren't balanced just by a change in management, right?
No, not at all.
A crime was committed, and the text insists that disobedience demands a payment. The wage of disobedience is death. But God is trapped by his own emotions. He loves Adam too profoundly to execute him.
He can't kill him.
So the author introduces this incredibly visceral, jarring imagery of the surprised lamb.
It is a dark pivot in the narrative. Prior to this moment, death did not exist in the garden's ecosystem. Nothing had ever died. God must introduce the concept of death to the garden, specifically to generate innocent blood to cover their crime. He slaughters a lamb, the first death in existence, and physically covers Adam and Eve in its skin. It serves as a bloody, inescapable reminder of the cost of their failure.
Wow.
The text emphasizes that the universe had to witness God fairly exacting a punishment to maintain his sovereign integrity.
And the author takes a bizarre yet fascinating tangent here to explain the ongoing mechanics of blood. The text asks the reader, once they leave the perfect garden, where on earth are they ever going to find truly innocent blood again?
Right, because everything is corrupted now.
Exactly. The author claims this cosmic deficit is exactly why satanic rituals are obsessed with blood. The text argues blood isn't just biological fluid, it is the literal, potent life force of God's creations. It contains the echoes of that original garden-altering power.
Though the text does make one highly specific, slightly humorous exception.
Oh, right.
Jellyfish.
I love that detail. The author builds this terrifying theology of blood magic and sacrifice, and then casually adds, except jellyfish, obviously.
Obviously.
It's such a quirky, specific exclusion in the middle of a grand thesis, but it highlights the author's meticulous, if eccentric, categorization of the natural world. This blood sacrifice, however, brings us to a major transition. The blood of animals was merely a stopgap.
Yeah, it wasn't a permanent fix.
It wasn't sufficient to permanently balance the cosmic scales.
No, it was a temporary injunction. The text explains that God's relentless, enduring love for Adam required a permanent legal and spiritual solution.
Right.
It required the ultimate innocent blood. This is how the text contextualizes the arrival of Jesus. The author describes the son walking a grueling 20-kilometer path carrying a wooden cross, enduring horrific physical trauma, not just as a moral example, but as a necessary legal transaction.
Transaction.
Yes, it was the mechanism to finally restore the balance, break the covenant of death, and allow God to say, I will pay the ultimate fine myself, so that Adam does not have to.
But that transaction happens millennia later. In the immediate aftermath of the trial, Adam and Eve are locked out of the garden. They're exiled to this harsh rock called Earth. And because they are now flesh and blood, operating in a highly competitive material world managed by the serpent, they are assigned very specific, incredibly heavy responsibilities. So let's explore their unique duties in the mortal realm. The text frames these not just as jobs, but as ongoing spiritual trials.
Very much so.
Let's look at Adam first. What is his specific burden?
Adam's primary material responsibility is to till the earth, to conquer the environment, to provide, and to protect. The text reminds the listener that Satan, who now manages the earth, does not till or nurture.
He just consumes.
Exactly. Therefore, if the earth is going to yield food and shelter, Adam has to sweat and bleed for it. But his material job is secondary to his spiritual job.
Okay, what's his spiritual job?
Adam's ultimate defining responsibility is that he must give Eve the absolute best of himself. The text is unimaginably severe on this point. It directly equates a man mistreating a woman to physically impaling Christ with a sword.
Wait, if you were listening to this, absorb that comparison for a second. The text says that if Adam abuses, neglects, or acts cruelly toward Eve, he is literally taking a sword and thrusting it into Jesus, while Jesus' tears wash over his face.
That is exactly what it says.
The stakes of human marriage are elevated to the level of cosmic treason. Adam's ultimate goal on earth is to love Eve correctly. The text argues he has to earn his way back to his divine status by how meticulously he tends to this specific gift God gave him. If he fails his marriage, he doesn't just get a divorce. He stands trial for murder before God's throne.
To understand why the text places such a crushing, terrifying burden on Adam, we have to refer back to Eve's blueprint.
Right, her creation.
Yeah, right. Eve is not merely a human companion. She is a biological vessel containing the literal extracted attributes of the Creator. When Adam mistreats Eve, he is not just failing a partner. He is taking a personalized, irreplaceable gift, a gift crafted from God's own emotional essence, and desecrating it.
It's the ultimate insult. Think about it like a priceless vase.
Okay, a vase.
If your best friend spends years crafting a one-of-a-kind vase for you, pouring their heart into the design and giving it to you as a symbol of their love, if you take that vase, tell them it's ugly, and smash it on the pavement, you aren't just breaking clay.
No, you're not.
You are fundamentally rejecting and insulting the creator of the vase. The text argues that it is a spectacularly stupid strategy to insult the omnipotent being directly responsible for your continued existence.
A catastrophic failure of logic on Adam's part if he does so. Now, while Adam bears the heavy burden of provision and protection, Eve's assigned burden is equally immense, though entirely different in its nature.
What's hers?
Her earthly consequence is producing offspring through blood, pain, and labor. But her spiritual purpose is to operate as the active, living vessel of God's love on earth. The text is clear that she was not designed to suffer the winter, which is the author's metaphor for the harshness of providing, conquering, or fighting the elements. Those are Adam's engineered traits. She was designed for one primary spiritual function, to give Adam a reason to live.
The text asks a very blunt question, doesn't it? If not for love, then for what?
Yeah.
Does acquiring property or hoarding money actually give a man profound purpose? The author argues no. A man will not die for a bank account, but he will willingly die for his family. They are the engine that makes his survival meaningful.
Absolutely.
But the text also highlights a staggering psychological burden placed on Eve as the carrier of this divine love. Because she contains God's essence, she possesses an infinite, almost destructive capacity to forgive.
This is perhaps the most provocative and potentially controversial psychological claim in the entire document.
Yeah, it's intense.
The text uses this concept of implanted divine infusion to explain some of the darkest, most difficult earthly realities. It asks the listener to consider, why do some women stay with horrific abusers? Why does a mother continue to visit her son in prison every Saturday, even if he is a convicted mass murderer?
If you ask a modern psychologist that question, they will give you a clinical answer. They will say that is trauma bonding, or that is a systemic lack of resources, or that is deep-seated codependency.
Right.
It's viewed as a tragic human weakness or a psychological failing.
But the internal logic of this source claims the exact opposite. It argues that this behavior is not human weakness at all. It is the literal, unconditional, unrelenting love of God operating inside them.
Wow.
God endures betrayal. God forgives the unforgivable. God takes the blows, the insults, and the rejections from humanity because his nature leaves him no other choice but to love.
Because it's who he is.
Exactly. Therefore, Eve, and by extension, the women in the text's worldview carrying that specific divine trait, is fundamentally incapable of shutting that love off, even when it leads to her own destruction. The love she carries is so immense, so pure, that she actually suffers the holding of it.
She suffers the holding of it. That phrase is haunting. It means her capacity to forgive isn't a superpower. It's a divine weight she is forced to carry. It's an agonizing sentence.
It really is.
And I have to push back on this framing because applying this to modern domestic abuse is an incredibly dangerous way to view the world. It almost romanticizes staying in a destructive situation as a form of divine martyrdom.
It is a highly challenging framing, without question. But if we stick strictly to the architecture of the author's argument, the text isn't necessarily prescribing that women should stay in abusive situations.
Okay, then what is it doing?
Rather, it is explaining the mechanism of why they often do. The author views it as a tragic misapplication of divine technology. The love is pure, but it is being poured into a broken vessel, meaning the abusive Adam. And this fragility is exactly why Adam's command to protect her is so severe. Eve is this magnificent gift, brimming with divine forgiveness, but she is vulnerable to exploitation. Adam's job is to tend the garden of her heart. He has to trim the hedges, remove the thorns, cultivate the soil.
Mm-hmm.
If he exploits her infinite forgiveness instead of protecting it, the consequences, as we established, are cosmic.
The dynamic requires absolute, perfect participation from both sides. If the stakes of this love are so incredibly high, if we were talking about life, death, murder trials before God, and eternal divinity, how does this translate to someone going on a date on a Friday night in 2026?
Right. How does this apply today?
Because the author clearly believes this isn't just ancient history. This brings us to the text's severe warnings about what happens when this divine blueprint is ignored or manipulated in the modern world.
Yeah, the author leaps from the mythological past directly into contemporary society, insisting that men and women are still fundamentally, biologically, and spiritually wired for these ancient roles.
Still wired for them.
Yes. The text argues that a woman, by her divine design as a gift, must belong to someone, because a gift's purpose is only fulfilled when it is given and received. Conversely, it argues men are still wired by the Creator's original blueprint to hunt, to conquer, and to provide.
It's a very rigid, uncompromising application of the Eden blueprint, and the author directs incredibly sharp, specific warnings, particularly toward women, about the dangers of abusing God's implanted gift of love.
Extremely specific.
For example, the text explicitly condemns the modern phenomenon of catfishing, leading a man on for financial gain, attention, or favors without any actual intention of fulfilling the promise of affection.
It also targets social dynamics that modern society considers entirely normal. The text explicitly asserts that there is no such thing as a purely platonic male best friend of 10 years for a woman.
Oh man, I can hear listeners rolling their eyes at that one right now.
I know, it's a highly debated concept.
Yeah.
But the text claims that the man in that scenario is simply waiting for his opportunity. He is driven by his God-given, inescapable hunting nature. The author argues that by keeping him in the friend zone, the woman is innocently but destructively hoarding him and preventing him from fulfilling his divine purpose of finding his true mate.
If we break down the underlying logic of these warnings, it really reveals the core mechanism of the author's worldview. In this universe, emotions are not psychological developments.
No, they aren't.
They aren't social constructs we invented to help tribes survive. They are literal physical entities created by God. You cannot manufacture a moral compass, and you cannot fabricate genuine love. They are implanted divine technologies.
And that completely changes the severity of misusing them.
How so?
Well, if you borrow a friend's Ferrari and use it to plow a muddy cornfield, you aren't just driving poorly, you are willfully misappropriating expensive, finely tuned machinery. The text argues that misusing love flirting just for the thrill of the chase, manipulating affection for money, or stringing someone along isn't just a societal faux pas or bad manners. It is the active misappropriation of stolen divine technology. And the consequence of abusing that technology is brutal and automatic.
Yeah, the source states a rigid rule. Love cannot survive in a vacuum. It must be reciprocated to live. If a woman abuses this gift, if she parades it around, rents it to the highest bidder, or uses it purely for manipulation, the love will initiate a self-destruct sequence.
A literal self-destruct.
The text warns that she'll become bitter, hollow, and hateful. Seeking love in everything but never actually finding or giving it will literally kill her spirit. Yeah. You cannot cheat the blueprint. Love has to give in order to get.
And the warnings extend beyond manipulation. They cover the rejection of the blueprint entirely. The text introduces a concept it calls the corporate spinster. It asks the reader to consider the woman who dedicates her life entirely to climbing the corporate ladder, chooses to remain single, perhaps has pets instead of children, and entirely bypasses marriage.
Which, again, modern society views as a perfectly valid, empowering life choice.
Absolutely valid today. But the author argues from the perspective of cosmic law. The text states that this woman will eventually have to stand before God's throne and offer a legal defense for why she willfully refused to use his implanted love to unite with an Adam.
Wow.
She will have to answer to the Creator for rejecting the specific divine purpose for which she was engineered.
It is a stark, absolute, and highly traditional framing of human purpose. If you were created to be a specific tool for a specific job, leaving that tool in the shed is a violation of the manufacturer's intent.
Precisely.
But what I found genuinely surprising is that while the text operates through this extremely rigid theological lens, it does attempt to grapple with modern complexities, and it occasionally arrives at unexpected nuances.
It does do that. For instance, the text makes a definitive, uncompromising assertion regarding transgender identities. It categorizes them as a definite and no-go.
Right.
Within the author's logic, attempting to alter the physical frame God explicitly designed is a direct violation of the physical and spiritual blueprint. However, it demonstrates a surprising, almost begrudging leniency towards same-sex love.
This part fascinated me.
Really?
Yeah. The text reasons that if Eve loves Judy, it is still the exact same divine love being bestowed. The emotional machinery is operating correctly. And the author concludes that if that same-sex love is pure, true, and upholds all the required tenets of sacrifice, commitment, and mutual protection, God would need a pretty comprehensive argument against it to condemn it.
It highlights that for this specific author, the quality and the reverence for the divine emotion of love supersedes the strict physical matching, at least in that specific context.
That's a huge shift from the rest of the rigidity.
It is, because love is a universal entity implanted by God. Its pure expression holds immense weight. Whether you, as a listener, agree with any of these social applications, the text undeniably succeeds in painting a staggeringly high-stakes, intense picture of human romance.
Well, without a doubt.
It takes the mundane struggles of dating and marriage and elevates them to a cosmic battleground.
It fundamentally re-enchants the concept of relationships. It strips away the randomness of, like, a Tinder swipe or a chance meeting at a coffee shop,
Right.
and replaces it with profound, terrifying intentionality.
Right.
When you read this document and then you look out your window and see a 90-year-old couple sitting on a park bench holding hands,
Yeah.
this text argues you aren't just looking at two people who got lucky and didn't get divorced.
No.
You are looking at victorious, battle-scarred stewards of an ancient divine mission. They were handed the volatile, dangerous ingredients of God's own heart. They navigated the treacherous mortal realm managed by the serpent, and they tended their garden perfectly. It makes the concept of love feel incredibly heavy, but also impossibly beautiful.
We have covered an immense expanse of theological and philosophical ground today. Let's trace the arc of the journey we've taken through this unique document.
Let's do it. We started by exploring a universe where Adam wasn't just the accidental first man, but a precise entity engineered specifically for peer-to-peer fellowship and debate with the Creator. We saw how God sacrificed his own time to answer Adam's logic, crafting Eve not as a secondary afterthought, but as a breathtaking, deliberate vessel. She was filled with God's own emotional DNA, his kindness, his patience, his endless ability to forgive all, to ensure Adam would never be alone.
And then we analyzed the mechanics of the fall, framing it as a cosmic tragedy where pure, unblemished divine innocence was weaponized by the ancient jealousy of an angel who lost his place as the favored son.
Right, Satan.
We broke down the intricate legal loopholes of the Eden courtroom, where the serpent's silence forced a perfect God to banish his creations to maintain the balance of cosmic law, introducing the terrifying concept of innocent blood.
And we explored the immense, crushing burdens placed on both genders in the mortal realm. We looked at Adam's absolute mandate to provide, protect, and cherish, knowing that any cruelty toward Eve is a literal sword thrust into the Creator.
Yeah.
And we examined Eve's profound burden to carry the infinite, sometimes agonizing capacity for divine forgiveness, all of it stemming from the Creator's overwhelming, relentless love for Adam. It is a blueprint of staggering proportions, demanding absolute reverence.
It is a reality where nothing is casual. And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a lingering question that builds on the foundation of everything we've discussed today.
Lay it on us.
We've spent this time analyzing the source's core thesis, that human emotions are not our own psychological creations, but implanted living entities.
Right.
If this text is right, think about your own life. Think about the last time you felt an overwhelming surge of compassion for a stranger. Think about the time you found an endless, irrational well of forgiveness for someone who deeply wronged you. Or think about that indescribable, tear-inducing joy that hits you when you look at a sleeping child.
It's a really profound thought experiment.
It is. If the text is right, and it isn't actually you generating those feelings, if what you are experiencing in those intense moments is just a borrowed, ancient fragment of the divine echoing inside your chest, how does that change the way you view your own heart? Are your feelings truly your own property to manage? Or are you simply the current temporary custodian of something terrifyingly powerful, ancient, and whole?
If we are all just walking around holding borrowed pieces of the Creator's heart, well, we better be incredibly careful not to drop them. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it challenged your assumptions and gave you a completely new cosmic lens to look through. Keep questioning, keep exploring the architecture of the ideas around you, and we will see you on the next deep dive.